Hi, my name's Nicholas Johnson. Today we're talking about shooting race car pictures, and this is the Space Warehouse. I'm a photographer. Pretty much that was my side hustle, but everybody has a COVID story, and mine is that it jettisoned me out of the art world production and into my primary source of income coming from race car photography. So now I travel around the country following race car teams and taking pictures of them. In this video, I'm going to talk about shooting pictures of race cars. I'm going to talk specifically about what settings I use. I'm going to talk about my camera bodies. I'm going to talk about what lenses I use and why, when to use motion blur to make cars look like they're going really fast, and when to freeze the action to get those nasty, gritty, irreplaceable photos of racing cars and teams for the owners who hire me to follow them around at the events. Mainly, how to turn in pictures they simply can't get by handing off their iPhone to their buddy Jacob in the pit. Here, take this picture. Taking really good race car pictures all starts with access. The first and most important thing is getting permission to be there. And that's not just because you want to follow the rules. I mean, let's say you find a team that does want to hire you for the weekend, and they can even get you a pit pass and everything, and you get to that team's pit. The moment you step over that wall onto the hot side, some little dude in a yellow vest is going to zoom over there and shut you down right away if you don't have the proper permission from that facility. If you're at one of the bigger facilities. If you're at Indy, Daytona, Circuit of the Americas, Road Atlanta, Road America, they're super strict. They're super good at stopping you really fast. In the pits, again, your press pass is going to be your most valuable tool because the best pictures come from you being over the wall. Before you ever take a step over the wall into the hot pit area, just have a complete understanding of what objects move and when and why and how. And I would even say talk to the pit crews of the adjacent pit stalls to make sure that their guy's not about to come in or whatever, because your guy's coming in and you want to make sure you get really good pictures of them. Some of the most valuable pictures you can turn into a team are things that they just can't get any other way. And so if you can take pictures like these from the hot side of the pit, guys changing tires, guys checking the car out and just doing things, it's just, there's a lot of emotion and there's just a really interesting angle of all these cars. Yeah, it makes for really good photos. So you need a press pass in order to do that. Anyway, I say all that to say your press pass is just a golden ticket in your pocket, or around your neck in most cases. So talk to the race series that you're shooting for first and see if they can get you hooked up with a press pass. And then if you can't get through to those guys or if they can't help you, try to call the facilities themselves or try to look it up, email somebody, figure it out ahead of time, plan for that. Because once you do have access, like Indianapolis Motor Speedway, for instance, I was just there last weekend. If you have the right orange vest on, you can just go anywhere. You can go more places than the drivers that are there racing can go. When you leave pit lane and you want to go out towards some of the photo holes that are out on the good corners or on the S's or on the straightaway, you'll get yanked out of there if you don't have the bright orange vest on. But so yeah, getting access gets you better pictures. It's not that you can't do it without that. If you can't find access, go anyway. It's maybe why they make these super long lenses, because you can sometimes just reach out and take really good pictures. But if you can stand right on the side of the course, you can really make magic happen. Let's talk lenses. So I primarily bring 4 lenses with me when I'm going shooting races. I bring a 14 to 24 2.8, and then the 24 to 70 2.8. And then the 70 to 200, 2.8. Canon has the, what do they call it? The trifecta? Whatever. This is like the poor man's trifecta in that it only costs like $3,600 to get them from Sigma rather than like $6,000 to get them from Canon. And I shoot Nikon anyway. And then the 150 to 600 millimeter for those, I don't want to say rare. I don't use this super often, but every once in a while, man, if there's a really good spot, if you can get at the end of a straightaway where they're turning, you can get like a whole half mile in one shot. All the cars look like they're bunched up even though they're not because of the compression of the picture or whatever. You can get some really beautiful things. And then also you can reach really far. So like at Daytona International Speedway, the back straight on the road course, there's a pond where you would otherwise want to be standing to use like something like a 200 millimeter lens. And so you can just stand on the other side of the pond and then not miss things like this was a couple months ago. A guy was speeding down that straightaway and he lost a tire, didn't notice, kept going, and I got this really cool, actually this was the shot of the weekend for me at least, this guy sparking down the back straight at 100 miles an hour with no wheel. It's pretty sweet. Couldn't have happened without one of these fellers here. I mean, it could have, you could have just cropped way in, but you would have lost a lot of that photo. So the The 24-70 was what I thought would be like my main carry, because this is just a really versatile lens. 24 is pretty wide on a full frame body, and 70 is like whatever, you can get those portrait shots. But when I'm in the pits and stuff, I don't want to be close to people at all. I want to feel close, so I want to be able to zoom really far. It turns out that I use the 70-200 more than any other thing, because I mean, in the pits, if someone sees you coming, they suddenly either stiffen up or they start smiling, and both of those look really unnatural in that setting for the most part, especially during like when action's happening or whatever. So you don't want to bother people because they have a really intense thing happening, especially if you're like trying to capture them while they're at a pit stop, changing a tire, or refueling, or doing whatever to their car. I like to wander around the pits and get shots of my teams, get the crew guys, get the radio guy, get the people doing stuff that they're just naturally doing without them seeing me coming, so they look the way they really did look. And you can create some really good memories for those people that way. 70-200, I mean, it's a personal choice whether you're going to go something like 24-70 or 70-200, and it actually may be limited by like your physical strength. If you're a tiny person, you probably don't want to go a whole weekend carrying this lens on this camera, because I think it's like 6.5 or 7 pounds, the combo. Your wrist can get quite a workout, if not cause some damage. The 70-200 is what I have on my camera most of the time if I'm in the pit area, and then I'll have the 24-70 in a bag in case, you know, there's always some circumstance. Something may happen that's larger and you can't physically back up far enough. You can quick swap that out and get a wide shot of whatever the thing is. But out on the track, I carry a combination of these two lenses. Depending on the circumstances, I'll either have the 70-200 or the 150-600 equipped, depending on what's happening. It can be much easier to accurately track the speed of a car if he's much further away, because your hands are moving this fast, versus if he's right next to you and you're right next to the track and he's moving this fast, and you're trying to match the speed so that you can have a blurry background in a sharp car. Sometimes it's advantageous to grab 600 millimeters and actually just be further away from the straightaway. That way you can like as he's coming down the straightaway. Sometimes, in some circumstances, that can result in better photos. Sometimes also, though, literally the atmosphere gets in the way and it's too far away, and it's kind of like it creates a hazy effect that takes a lot away from the quality. So this only goes up to f6, f5, whatever, where this is an f2.8 lens. And there are certain circumstances that I will cover where 200 millimeters at f2.8 is what you want rather than 200 millimeters at f6. We'll get into that after I'm done talking about the lenses. I like to take a bicycle with me, and I have these two lenses. I like to make sure I can get around the whole track and visit all the different photo holes to get just the best opportunities. Sometimes there's cars that'll lose it a lot more around the S's versus just zooming by on a straightaway. That can make for some compelling content. So that's it. That covers lenses. To sum up, I like to have a super wide angle with me, because sometimes you can come up with a creative idea or something just strikes you and you just need way more space, although I use it very seldomly. The 24-70 is a super versatile lens, and you could probably get away with doing this for most shots of the whole weekend, but it's really nice to have 70-200, and once in a while it's super nice to have a super long lens with you too. I shoot for enduro racing, which is like these between 14 and 24 hour long races. So I have a lot of opportunities to move around a lot. I recognize sometimes there's sprint races. You only got 20 minutes and you don't want to have to carry all this kit with you. So in those instances, make sure you go to a practice day and you set up the shots that you want to take beforehand. You figure out what you're trying to do, and then write it down and get to it. I guess another piece of kit that I bring that's not camera related is that I drive to all of the events, even if it's across the country. I pull a 24-foot cargo trailer behind my truck, and not only does it double as another source of income, I use this app called YouShip on my way up, where I'm dragging people's motorcycles or whatever across the country for money. But also, once I get there, it doubles as a mobile office. So I've got a little table set up, I can charge batteries, I bring a fridge and a microwave with me, and it's the generator to run it all. And I can just kind of hang out in there, take a nap if you need to. These events are usually multiple days, and so I pack a bed, I'm not gonna lie, and a little portable air conditioner, and that's just like my little studio while I'm on course. That way I can bring a bicycle, I can bring a ladder. Sometimes you want to get over one of those ugly fences, or you just want a unique shot of a car from up high. So driving to the events can bring you more opportunity for more creativity, because you can't pack a ladder on a plane no matter how much you pay for extra bag space. But if you can't drive to a place, or if you won't drive to a place, it's good to set up a safe space. Like find either, if you're with a team, if they have some way to lock things up, or if you have a rental car or whatever, it's just good to have a home base, because you're gonna have a lot of equipment with you. It's heavy, you don't want to carry it all the time, but you want to make sure it's safe. And so it's great to have like a home base to lock up your computer, lock up your extra lenses, and then kind of you can keep going back to that place and like pick out whatever gear you need for the next whatever set of time you're working on. Okay, my camera body. For my main camera body, I am on a Nikon D850. This is a full frame 47 megapixel camera. I upgraded from the D500, which is shooting this wide shot here. A lot of people say that a crop sensor is advantageous when shooting sports because it helps you reach. But fun fact, the D850, being a full frame camera at 47 megapixels, is the same pixel density as the D500 being a crop sensor at 24 megapixels, which means there's basically a crop sensor on my sensor, and then my sensor is larger around the outside of that. So there's kind of a D500 inside my D850, meaning you can crop into a photo really far and not lose the clarity, because these pictures are gigantic. Which, on the downside, these pictures are gigantic. And a lot of times if you're on like continuous high mode and you're getting lots of pictures of the cars as they go zoom by, you're taking lots of pictures. You'll go home with, I don't know, I think from Indianapolis I had a little over 1,000 pictures to go through. Pretty easy to weed through them, but it will entice you to upgrade your laptop, which I have done. That's not always a bad thing. It's nice to have new kit, but more kit, more money, whatever. I'm sure if you're watching this, you've already started to understand that this is if it's a hobby, it's an expensive one, and if it's a career, it's also an expensive one. Anyway, I'm on the Nikon D850, and I take my D500 with me because, I mean, I'm on a bicycle, I'm doing all kinds of stuff, I'm getting creative, I'm bending down, and I'm around a lot of motion and a lot of people. It's not impossible to expect that this could get knocked out of my hand, or I could fall off my bike and destroy my camera. So I do want to have a backup camera with me so that I don't lose any time. And another fun fact, if you're on a D500, the button layout on the D850 is exactly the same as the D500 in all ways. It has a couple of extra features like focus stacking, but it's the same. Like you could just wake up and use either camera and not lose any time. They work the same. It's really great. And I recognize that I'm gonna need to switch to a mirrorless camera. I think I'm gonna wait like 2 more generations. I know the new ones are really good, but this thing is really, like, a 3D tracking on this thing it never misses, ever. I love it. I recognize also that these Nikon cameras are just for video, but that's why I have this third camera sitting on a Ronin SC gimbal, my Sony Alpha A6600, which I do pack and bring along with me because I do like to shoot some video here and there. And this is the part where all of the big photo YouTuber guys start to talk about how they've pared down their life and they're down to like one set of cameras that have light lenses, like the new Sony stuff or all that. And I'm sure I'll get there, but right now I'm carrying 40 pounds of camera gear with me, and getting on planes is just such a fun time. On to camera settings. For almost every situation in race car picture photography, there's only 2 main like sets of settings that you're going to want to use, or that I use at least. One is aperture priority mode with the super fast shutter and a super wide aperture, and the other is shutter priority mode with a fairly slow shutter and whatever else the camera wants to do to compensate for that. There's a couple of unusual circumstances where you won't be using these 2 settings, like this picture I took of a pit stop in the middle of the night during a 24-hour race at VIR, but you don't really run into those circumstances super often. So other than these 2 things I'm about to talk about are the way I set up my camera. So first, let's talk about I call it a go fast picture. The pictures where you're panning sideways as a car goes by on a straightaway. You're gonna wanna set your camera to shutter priority mode. That way you're choosing the length of time that the shutter's open, and then your camera chooses all the other settings to compensate for it. I personally still like to maintain control over ISO settings, just because I don't want that to get out of control. If you still want to use auto ISO, you can just manage its top end, like say that it can't go above ISO 4000 or something like that, because you want to keep the pictures really clear. You're only going to keep a few of the hundreds of these pictures that you take because of how it works. And so the ones that are really good and in focus, you also want them to be really clear and good. Get over onto shutter priority mode and you set your shutter to, let's I would say you start with 1/160, so 160th of a second, and then set your shooting mode. On Nikon, it's called CH, continuous high. I don't know what it's called on the other ones, but that's the one that makes it when you hold down the shutter button, it'll just take a lot of pictures. And then make sure your autofocus is on continuous mode. So it's continuous autofocus because your camera's gonna refocus and remeter between every single shot, even if it's shooting, this is gonna shoot 9 frames a second. If you just can't nail it at those settings, you can crank the shutter speed up to 1/200, but I wouldn't go much higher than that unless you're taking pictures of the cars that are going really fast. These settings are for, I'm gonna say 100 miles an hour from between 20 meters and 50 meters away from the car. So what's actually happening under these settings is when you push the button, when you take a picture, your shutter is going to be open for 1/160th of a second. And in that time, if a car is going 100 miles an hour, he'll travel about a foot while the shutter is open. So your idea is to get 1 foot of dirt, grass, and asphalt blurring by while the car stays perfectly tracked with your camera and he stays really sharp. And the more you can slow down your shutter speed, the more blurry you're going to get and the cooler and the creamier the pictures are going to look. But the harder it is to perfectly track the speed of the car matched with the speed of your panning with your camera, which, like I said before, is easier if the car is really far away and you're way zoomed out versus if the car's right next to you on the track and you're trying to whip it as he goes by. This makes a blurry background and blurry wheels, which really captures the feeling of the speed of the car on that straightaway. And that's what you're going for. You're going for the go fast picture, so you want to make it look like he's going fast. You are going to shoot on continuous mode, so that means you're going to take a lot of pictures, and so be prepared for that. Probably going to expect to get, based on how shaky your hands are and how much practice you have, you might get 1 in 10 that are like in just flawless focus of the car while the background is blurry. You can crank the shutter speed down the more you get good at it. You're going to take a lot of pictures though. You're going to throw a lot of them away. That's for cars that are zooming by you. So now for cars that are coming straight at you, like if you're at a corner and a car is going to round the corner and come straight at you and there's going to be other traffic behind him, that's when you want to switch your camera to aperture priority mode. And now you are controlling the camera's aperture size, the F number, and the camera is going to go ahead and control the shutter speed. And again, I maintain control over the ISO. So now you're going to go over to aperture mode. You're going to crank your aperture down to as small of a number as your lens will allow. These are f2.8 lenses. For this, we want a fast shutter. We want the fastest shutter we can get while having the aperture wide open. So now instead of the blur of the background going by to make depth in your picture and to make feeling in your picture, now you're relying on the depth, the shallower depth of field from the wide open aperture. So you're going to focus right on the grill of the car, or if you can get him, the driver. Again, you're going to want to be on continuous autofocus mode, and circumstances like this are a great argument for why back button autofocus, it's just the way to go. I feel like everybody needs to switch to back button autofocus. It could be a whole video by itself, and maybe I should do one, but you can set your camera up a certain way so that this button on the back is your autofocus. It's the only thing that's your autofocus, and your shutter button is only your shutter. So when you push this halfway, it doesn't do anything. That way, you can set it so that your continuous autofocus is also your single point autofocus, because it focuses and then stops focusing as soon as you take your finger off this button. So if you're looking at a stationary object and you want to line it up, or if something's coming at you and you have to continuously focus all the way up until you take the picture, you have both of those modes basically in one mode. Back button autofocus is both continuous and single autofocus. You should switch if you haven't. Make the switch. Make the switch. As long as you can't see the rims of his wheels, you want to have the fastest shutter speed that you can. And so that's why we're taking the aperture and cranking it wide open, because this way you're going to get really clear picture of the car, and then he should have like kind of a blurred background because of your aperture. And you can get some really cool shots on some really long straightaways if you have the really long lenses. For an example, here's a shot that this is a little more than a half-mile straightaway, but it's all in one picture. And the guy closest to us, the purple car, was one of the teams that hired me, and he's in focus. All these cars chasing him down the straightaway. It's awesome. These cars are super far apart, but they look super close together. You got the heat rising off the asphalt in the background. That's just a really cool setup. I love taking this picture if I can find a straightaway that has a corner at the end of it. I mean, I guess they all do, but if I can get to that corner. So yeah, with this setup, we're freezing time. We're freezing motion completely. Unlike the other one where we want to show the motion of the moment. Those are two circumstances where I switch between shutter priority and aperture priority mode. Going back to the pits, which is personally, this is my favorite place to shoot at races and events. Pit stops and just the crew guys doing stuff between pit stops, just what they're doing naturally. You can get a lot of really cool shots of these guys. especially if you have a long lens and they don't see you, which I really prefer. Same for the pits. I stay on aperture priority mode and I keep the shutter speed really fast. And try to keep it in your mind that you have to switch back, because if you have a slow shutter in the pits, everything's going to be blurry. There is a lot of action and nobody's standing still for very long unless they're like in a daze, which can also make some really cool pictures. A really small aperture, high f-stop number can kind of make pictures even that come out of a really nice DSLR just look like iPhone photos if everything's in focus and there's a whole lot going around in the background. I mean, there's circumstances where you do want to do it. Team photos or whatever, you want everybody in focus. They're not all going to be on the same plane, which is another thing you have to keep in mind. I'm full of tangents, but let's stay with me here. If you have a really wide open aperture and you're taking a team picture, try to be cognizant of what's in a plane, because whatever you focus on from that point, it's going to go straight to the left and straight to the right, up and down, will be in focus. But anything like even a couple of feet in either direction of that is going to be out of focus. So if you're at an angle shooting these people, you're going to cut through the plane of focus and you're going to have half the team be fuzzy. And that's an easy mistake to make. So just keep in mind that your focal plane is flat, even though the world is not. That can help you with all creative photography in a zillion different circumstances. Another time I was in Virginia, one of the teams had broken something on the front strut tower of their car, and they had to weld it back together like right there on the pit while they're in the middle of the race. Obviously I can't be right there with the camera being like, hey, let me take a picture of you guys while you weld this car back together. A, I'm gonna blind myself or get burned by something, and B, I'm just in the way, and people, you don't want to bother any of these people that are paying you money to take their pictures. So a long lens, a really opportune window of space to shoot through and see, and that was my favorite picture of that race, this guy welding this thing back together. I'm gonna just brush over a couple of the other settings. Metering, you want to have that. I put my metering settings on the center weighted, not the point metering, but I actually don't know the name of it. Sometimes that results in a blown out sky or something that's kind of messed up, but whatever I'm actually aiming directly at has a really good exposure, and that's important because a lot of times you just can't get a do-over if there's these tense situations that are happening really fast. I use auto white balance. I just let it go. I edit every photo that comes out of the camera. Nothing goes to a customer that's just straight out of camera. And so in that editing, I'm going to change the color temperature anyway. So the white balance, at least for car photography, you don't have time between photos to be setting up those individual things. Just make your color temperature adjustments in the edit. That, I think, sums it up. I think that's all of the settings that are important, at least. I mean, obviously you're going to be tinkering and changing, and if it's raining, it's going to be completely different than if it's sunny, and all that stuff. But hopefully some of this helps you at least get a start. If you have no idea what you're doing, but you have a camera, you can use these settings to pop on out there and just start it out, play with it, take some pictures. And if you can get good at taking pictures of race cars, that can go a super long way to just being good at taking pictures of just about anything else. I know that's not always true, especially with night photography, so good luck with that. But I'm going to be doing some real estate stuff too coming up, and I haven't done any of it yet, but I feel that I have a competent understanding of what settings I can use with things that are standing perfectly still. So thank you. I hope you found this somewhat useful or at least entertaining. I imagine if you're watching the video this far, you're probably procrastinating doing something else anyway. But if there's any part of it that you want me to go more in depth on, leave a comment below and I'm happy to make more videos. I think I'm going to do back button autofocus because I really believe in it. I thought it was confusing at first, but I find it helpful in all photography. Yeah, thank you. I'm still always a little awkward ending videos. I don't have I need a thing to say. I'm not Tim Tracker with the paying the thing. I don't know. I appreciate you guys. Like and subscribe.